Damn.
Yeah.
Okay, now you've really piqued my interest here. What kinds of things? Because I'm highly paranoid as it is. So in because I look at the American media as a very fear mongering and not very accurate. I don't trust anything they say, but and I also kind of view them as like I feel like they also are puppets for the state, whereas like they don't really hit on any. There's not really a lot of negative press towards like certain governmental policies. Like, and again, also to be fair, I barely watch the news, so maybe that's going on and I just have no idea. But I mean, I feel like the Pentagon losing track of $2.1 trillion in assets would be like a huge story, but it's really not. And that so in your opinion, where are you seeing certain signs like that within the United States, right? Like, is this something that you think that this isn't happening, or is this something that you think is definitely happening?
Well, no, it's not happening in that way because, well, right now we have a Democrat who's not trying to it's very difficult. It'd be very difficult in this country because, for example, one of our oligarchs is Murdoch, who owns Fox News, and which is a very, very powerful propaganda outlet. It works very efficiently. It really does. And it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for any president, even a Trump, to try and take him over. He's more powerful than, in a sense, any president, in a way, right? So that kind of thing that's easy in Hungary or even in India is a lot more difficult here. What I see happening in media is the media was very traumatized under Trump. I mean, because here's one of the things he did as a demagogue. So plenty of people already hated immigrants. Plenty of whites didn't like black people. They didn't like Jews and Muslims, etc. And they maybe some of them distrusted the press, but he made the press a hate object. At those rallies, he, penned them up and had people jeer at them and say, lock them up. And so the press, and there was a lot of violence and threats against the press that continue. And so he really, and that's another sign I was like, check, because they have to go after the press and make people think they're just partisan hacks, because when the press exposes their corruption, they need people to hate the press and not believe the press. So they all do that. Duterte did it in the Philippines. It's like, literally is like a checklist. So Trump did that. And so the media, now he's been gone for a while, but they're very scarred, even the big outlets. And so look what's happening at CNN, which came under intense scrutiny. Jim Acosta was attacked, by Trump and lost his press pass, had to sue. And so now there's this thing going on where they're preventively moving to the center under Chris Licht, this new boss. And that's something that they're being self-protective, but I don't think that's in their interest. I think it's going to restrict further the kinds of things they cover eventually. So that they're almost like they're preparing for the GOP to come back and attack them again, and they want to be not, in CNN's case, they don't want to be as liberal. So that kind of thing is going on.
Yeah, I think that you definitely one of the self-censorship, right, from in any aspect is a giant problem. Because we definitely, I think the American people, everyone really wants the raw truth, in my opinion, I think we're seeing that less and less as days, as time marches on. But there's a lot of really good independent journalists that are disseminating news. Ford Fisher, he's a friend of the show. He's been on but that's very interesting. And you mentioned something about the courts, right? Like is that like phase 3 is kind of controlling the legal system?
Yeah. You know what's happening. I'm not an expert in the judiciary, but we've seen how the Supreme Court, in particular, that the attitudes and actions of Justice Thomas, where his wife was like an insurrectionist. She was, exchanging text messages, egging on the overthrow of the government, and he didn't recuse himself. And he was actually, they were very interested in her, the DOJ, and he announced that he was exploring trying to make it harder for the media to defend itself against libel cases. So basically, you have these signs, and also the way that they did the Dobbs ruling. They've become an activist court because there's so many ultra-conservative people. But Justice Thomas is really just showing that he's not interested in democratic, with a small d, notions of fairness, objectivity, rule of law, and that's very disturbing. So that's what, we have Biden in power, who's a Democrat. So it's not a question of somebody taking over the judiciary like Orban does. And what that means is you force out judges who are not your friends, and you harass them, we've had this in this country. There's scores of people have been resigning from election workers, all kinds of public positions. And then you appoint people who are going to be, do what you need them to do. Yeah. So one of the reasons Trump's coup attempt didn't work is over 60 judges in the fall of 2020, including many Trump appointees, would not, they didn't want to fix his, go with his rigged election thing, and they turned back his attempts to change the results. Over 60 judges. Now, would that happen today? I don't know, but that's what the Republicans have been working on, getting rid of these judges who aren't going to do their bidding. And the same with the GOP politicians, people who have been standing up to Trump, like Liz Cheney, they're out now. There's no room for them anymore. And then the new people coming in are, even if they're not for Trump right now, a lot of them are criminals. I mean, they're like, members of Oath Keepers. So they're just people who are very lawless, a lot of the new people coming in. So it's like a shift in the political culture, and it affects the judiciary, it affects the political parties, the civil service, all of that.
Most definitely. This is very interesting. I'm fascinated because I've never looked at it through the same lens that you have, right? When towards that point in time, I'm really good at identifying certain characteristics that I have. So when I looked at Trump towards the end, I saw myself in him. The worst aspects of myself, nonetheless, but I was like, I would probably be doing the exact same thing. Like, I don't want to lose. How do I hold on to power? But when you think about like the way that this whatever the enigma that is Trump kind of turned the country on itself, and you had these devout these loyalists, and you had this insurrection, and not only that, you also had like the getting the judges in place. Like, that is very meticulously planned, and I wonder if it's by design. Is he that smart, or is it kind of a happy coincidence? I will also comment on the Clarence Thomas thing. Not a lot of people know that he's been in bed with Monsanto, and that his wife is kind of crazy, like ultra conservative human beings. Yeah. And the way that they're able to kind of manipulate these, not necessarily these laws, or the readings of the laws is fascinating to me. Like, there's certain aspects that I'm inclined to be like, oh, that's interesting. I like that. I like states' rights. Or I like where you're going. But when you kind of look at, if you read into kind of their history and all these groups that they're a part of, it gets a little interesting. So kudos to you for knowing about. One
of the other things about Clarence Thomas as well is, I believe it was for the Roe v. Wade decision. He wrote his own opinion.
Yes.
He had said that, like, to revisit things like Obergefell for marriage equality, and I forget the name of the case, but for the interracial marriage, which is insane considering that he's a black man married to a very white woman.
Yeah, but it, like, in his opinion, it's not so. And again, I'm not saying whether I agree or not, but like, I think what he's saying is maybe his goal in life is to make the government smaller and leave that up to states. But this is, John, we've had this. Is it morally correct to undo all of this? And doesn't that cause more problems? I think that at the end of the day, we can all agree it probably does. And we should just kind of leave things the way they are. But I don't want to we'll get lost in the weeds there. But yeah, so I just didn't know. You're probably the first guest I've had on that has talked about that, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, for your question, which a lot of people ask me, is like, is there a design, there, or is like Trump did he make it up as he was going along? It's a little of both, because one thing that really scared me that I didn't know before I was researching the book is, so Trump is an opportunist, like all these guys, Putin. And so they will say anything to anyone. They will be anything they need to be, and they can reverse their positions. And so in that sense, they're always looking for what they should do to survive. It's all about them. That's all they care about is them. They don't actually often care about their own families. They're just them and money and power and survival. But he surrounded himself really early on with people who had decades of experience wrecking democracies. And I had not realized that. So Roger Stone and Paul Manafort, they had a lobby firm from the 1980s that worked for a lot of dictators. And in 1985, they were hired by Ferdinand Marcos, like the dictator in Philippines, because he was starting to lose power and he was worried about it. So he decides to have this like snap election. And he was, basically like, he hired them to basically pull off this fraudulent election in 1985. So here are people who ended up being involved with Stop the Steal. And then, of course, Manafort also worked for Putin before he worked for Trump. So these are people who have been doing these things, including election fraud and stuff, for years, for like 40 years. And then there's Steve Bannon, who admires all, right-wing dictators, and well, actually all dictators, all people of power, and is a very skilled propagandist and strategist who is he was advising Bolsonaro. I mean, these are people who really know what they're doing and understand how power works and what you have to do to capture power. And so, in fact, a week after the inauguration of Trump, when you remember how he gets into office and they immediately do the so-called Muslim ban on travel?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of chaos. I got this like vision where I said, oh my God, I know what they're doing. And this was Bannon. He was the mastermind. And there's this thing I call it shock events in the book, where you come in and you shock the system. And Bannon has written about this. And you create a lot of chaos. You create a lot of anxiety and throw everything, again, into chaos. And that's how you introduce that this is going to be a different kind of government. You
set the tone. You make sure that everyone understands what's up.
So they're called shock events. And in fact, on purpose, they implemented that Muslim ban without telling the TSA or the port authorities, because they wanted to have a lot of chaos. And I wrote this op-ed for CNN, and I'm amazed they published it. And the title was Trump and Bannon's Coup in the Making. And it was about how they were going to start capturing the state. And this was a week after the inauguration. And I laid it all out. And when I go back and look at it, I'm like, oh my God, it was like all happening, And I don't know how I saw it. I think just from studying fascists for so long, because I was writing my book. I hadn't finished my book then. I just got a sixth sense. And so Bannon he's a big fan of Mussolini, probably likes Hitler, and he has studied all of these game plans. So, Trump knows who to surround himself with. And those are the people who, have the wisdom. And they helped him. And think about January 6th. He had Michael Flynn, who is very skilled, psychological warfare and other things. He had Roger Stone again. He had Bannon. He had all kinds of experts in authoritarian this and that helping him.